Marcus Rodriguez had always believed that courage was something you either had or you didn't. Growing up in a small Texas town where Friday night football was religion and military service was considered the highest honor, he never questioned his path. At 18, with his high school diploma fresh in his hands in college, seeming like an impossible dream due to his family's financial struggles, the Army recruiter's promises of education benefits and steady pay sounded like the answer to everything. His mother, Elena, had cleaned houses for wealthy families since Marcus was born. His father had disappeared when Marcus was 7, leaving behind only unpaid bills and broken promises. Elena worked 16-hour days to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. When Marcus announced he was enlisting, she cried for 3 days straight. Not because she was proud, though she was, but because she knew what war could do to young men. Her own brother had returned from Vietnam a changed man, jumping at every sudden noise and drinking himself to sleep most nights. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Mio," she told Marcus the night before he left for basic training. They sat in their tiny kitchen, sharing a plate of her homemade tamales and watching the steam rise from their coffee cups. "You're already the best man I know." Marcus squeezed her weathered hand. "This is my chance, Mama, to give you a better life. To give us both a better life." Basic training at Fort Benning was everything the movies said it would be and nothing like them at the same time. The physical challenges pushed Marcus to limits he didn't know he had. Running 5 miles before sunrise became routine. Carrying a 60-pound pack through obstacle courses in Georgia's suffocating heat became second nature. But it was the mental transformation that surprised him most. The scared 18-year-old who left Texas gradually disappeared, replaced by someone harder, more focused, more confident, his drill sergeant. A career soldier named Patterson, who had served 3 tours in Iraq, took a special interest in Marcus. "Rodriguez, you've got something most of these kids don't," Patterson told him during a particularly brutal training exercise. "You understand what's at stake? You're not here because Daddy couldn't say no to your tantrums. You're here because you need to be here." Marcus excelled in marksmanship training, earning expert ratings that caught the attention of his instructors. His steady hands and natural ability to remain calm under pressure made him a perfect candidate for specialized training. By the time he graduated basic training, he had been selected for advanced individual training as a designated marksman. The role came with additional responsibility and danger, but also with the respect of his peers and higher pay grades. During his brief leave before advanced training, Marcus returned home to find his mother had framed his basic training graduation photo and hung it prominently in their living room. She had lost weight during the months he was gone, working extra hours to save money for his wedding fund, though he had no girlfriend and no immediate plans for marriage. "Every mother should have a photo like this," she said, touching the glass gently. "A son who became a man with honor." That evening, Marcus met up with his high school friends at the local diner where they had spent countless hours during their teenage years. Most had taken jobs at the nearby oil refinery or the meatpacking plant. A few had started community college. They treated Marcus differently now, with a mixture of respect and distance that made him uncomfortable. The easy camaraderie of high school felt forced and artificial. "Man, you look different," said his friend Jake, studying Marcus over a plate of chicken fried steak. "Bigger, I guess. More serious." "Army will do that," Marcus replied, pushing his food around his plate. He found himself scanning the exits, noting potential threats, behaviors that had become automatic during training. The crowded diner felt chaotic and unpredictable in ways that the structured environment of military life never did. His best friend from high school, Tommy, had gotten his girlfriend pregnant and was working double shifts at the refinery to support his new family. "Don't get me wrong, I'm happy for you and all," Tommy said quietly when the others weren't listening. "But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had the guts to leave like you did." Marcus wanted to tell Tommy that leaving didn't require guts as much as it required desperation, that the Army wasn't an adventure or a career move, but a necessity, that every day he wondered if he had made the right choice. But those thoughts felt like betrayal of the image everyone had built of him as the local boy who made good. Advanced individual training took place at Fort Hood, where Marcus learned advanced marksmanship techniques and small unit tactics. The training was more intensive and realistic than basic training, with scenarios designed to replicate actual combat conditions. Marcus discovered he had a natural talent for reading terrain and wind patterns, skills that would prove crucial in his designated marksman role. His instructor, Sergeant First Class Williams, was a veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan who had seen enough combat to understand the weight of what they were training for. Unlike the drill sergeants in basic training who relied on intimidation and volume, Williams taught through patient repetition and careful explanation. A designated marksman isn't a sniper, Williams explained during one of their training sessions. Snipers work alone or in pairs, taking single shots from concealed positions. You'll be with your squad, providing precision fire support while they maneuver. You're their guardian angel, but you're also right there in the fight with them. The distinction mattered more than Marcus initially understood. During field exercises, he learned to balance his role as a marksman with his responsibilities as a team member. He couldn't disappear into a hide site and wait for targets of opportunity. He had to move with his squad, cover their advances, and be ready to engage multiple targets quickly when the situation demanded it. As his training progressed, Marcus began to understand the true complexity of modern warfare. The enemy wouldn't always wear uniforms or carry obvious weapons. Civilians and combatants often looked identical until the moment shots were fired. Rules of engagement were complicated, requiring split-second decisions that could mean the difference between saving lives and taking innocent ones. During one particularly realistic training exercise, Marcus's squad was tasked with clearing a mock village populated by role-players acting as civilians and insurgents. The scenario was designed to test their ability to identify threats while minimizing civilian casualties. Marcus had his rifle trained on a figure, moving between buildings when he noticed the person was carrying what appeared to be an improvised explosive device. His finger found the trigger and began to apply pressure when he noticed something that made him hesitate. The figure was moving wrong, not with the purposeful stride of someone carrying a weapon, but with the shuffling gait of someone elderly or injured. In the split second before he would have fired, Marcus realized the IED was actually a bundle of clothing or personal belongings. The exercise ended with his squad successfully completing their mission. But Marcus was shaken by how close he had come to killing an innocent civilian even in training. That night, Sergeant Williams pulled him aside for a private conversation. "You did good today, Rodriguez. You showed judgment under pressure." "I almost shot a civilian," Marcus protested. "Almost doesn't count. What counts is that you didn't. That you took the extra second to be sure." Williams lit a cigarette and stared out at the darkening sky. "In real combat, you'll face that same situation dozens of times. The enemy knows we're trying to avoid civilian casualties, so they'll use that against us. They'll hide among non-combatants, use children as human shields, attack from mosques and schools. Your job isn't to solve the moral complexity of war. Your job is to protect your brothers and complete the mission." The conversation stayed with Marcus through the remainder of his training. He began to understand that being a soldier required more than physical courage and technical skill. It demanded the ability to make life and death decisions with incomplete information while maintaining adherence to rules of engagement that often seemed to favor the enemy. As his training neared completion, Marcus received orders for his first deployment. He would be assigned to Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 506th Infantry Regiment, part of the 101st Airborne Division. Their deployment would take them to a forward operating base in Afghanistan's Kunar province, an area known for frequent insurgent activity and challenging terrain. The night before graduation from advanced individual training, Marcus called his mother from a payphone outside the barracks. The call was brief, as international calls were expensive on his soldiers' pay, but Elena's voice carried across the distance with perfect clarity. "I pray for you every night, Mio. Every single night." "I know, Mama. Your prayers will keep me safe." My prayers and your training and your good sense. Don't try to be a hero, Marcus. Heroes die young. Just come home. After hanging up, Marcus stood in the humid Texas evening and tried to imagine what the mountains of Afghanistan would look like. He had studied maps and satellite photos during his training, but he couldn't quite picture himself actually being there. Carrying a weapon through hostile territory where people would be actively trying to kill him, his graduation from AD. The improvised explosive device that changed Marcus Rodriguez's life forever was buried beneath a pile of rocks that looked no different from 1,000 other rock piles scattered across the Afghan landscape. The insurgents had placed it along a route that coalition forces used regularly, knowing that eventually a patrol would pass close enough to trigger the pressure plate. Hidden beneath the seemingly innocent stones, Marcus never saw the explosion that shattered his world. One moment he was scanning the valley through his rifle scope, watching for threats against his squad as they moved toward the suspected weapons cache. The next moment he was lying on his back 30 feet from his original position, his ears ringing and his vision filled with dancing spots of light that refused to go away no matter how hard he blinked. The blast had thrown him against a boulder with enough force to crack 3 ribs and dislocate his left shoulder. But the real damage was invisible, hiding inside his brain where the shock wave had scrambled neural pathways and damaged connections that controlled everything from balance to memory to emotional regulation. The traumatic brain injury would reveal itself slowly over the coming weeks and months. Like a photograph developing in slow motion, Specialist Jackson found Marcus first, calling frantically for the medic while trying to assess his wounds. Marcus could see Jackson's mouth moving, could see the concern in his eyes, but the words sounded like they were coming from underwater. His hands and feet felt disconnected from his body, and when he tried to sit up, the world spun in sickening circles that made him vomit onto the rocky ground. "Stay down, Rodriguez. Don't try to move." Jackson's voice finally penetrated the fog that seemed to surround Marcus's brain. "Doc's coming, just stay still." The squad's medic, a soft-spoken soldier from North Carolina named Hayes, reached Marcus within minutes of the explosion. His assessment was quick and professional, checking for bleeding, broken bones, and signs of serious head trauma. Marcus's pupils were dilated and uneven, responding slowly to the penlight that Hayes shined in his eyes. His speech was slurred when he tried to answer basic questions about his name and location. "We need to get him back to base now," Hayes told Staff Sergeant Chun over the radio. "Possible traumatic brain injury, multiple contusions, and at least 1 dislocated shoulder. He's conscious but not tracking well." The helicopter evacuation was Marcus's first ride in a medical aircraft, though he would remember little of it afterward. The flight medic started in 4 and monitored his vital signs while the helicopter raced back toward the forward operating base. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes aware of the helicopter's vibrations and the medic's voice, sometimes lost in a gray haze where thoughts refused to connect properly. At the base's aid station, Marcus underwent his first thorough medical evaluation since the explosion. The base physician, a lieutenant colonel who had treated hundreds of blast injuries during his deployment, recognized immediately that Marcus's injuries extended far beyond the obvious physical trauma. The dilated pupils, confusion, and difficulty maintaining balance all pointed to a significant brain injury that would require specialized treatment. "We're going to send you to Landstuhl," the doctor explained to Marcus, referring to the major military medical center in Germany. "They have specialists there who deal specifically with blast injuries. You're going to be okay, soldier, but it's going to take time." Marcus wanted to protest, to insist that he was fine and ready to return to his squad, but the words wouldn't form properly in his mouth. When he tried to stand, the room tilted at impossible angles and he had to grab the examination table to keep from falling. The realization that something was seriously wrong with his brain terrified him more than any enemy fire he had faced in Afghanistan. The flight to Germany took place on a medical transport aircraft, filled with other wounded soldiers. Marcus lay on a stretcher, watching the ceiling of the aircraft and listening to the conversations of the medical staff. Some patients were unconscious, others moaned softly from pain, and a few talked quietly with the flight nurses about their injuries and their fears about what would happen next. Landsts. Regional Medical Center was Marcus's first experience with advanced military medical care. The facility was enormous, with specialized units for every type of combat injury imaginable. Marcus was admitted to the traumatic brain injury ward, where he joined other soldiers who had suffered similar invisible wounds from improvised explosive devices, mortar rounds, and rocket-propelled grenades. His roommate was a Marine sergeant named Williams, who had been injured by a roadside bomb in Iraq 3 weeks earlier. Williams had been through the initial stages of brain injury recovery and served as an unofficial guide for newly arrived patients. "The worst part isn't the headaches or the dizziness," Williams explained to Marcus during one of his more lucid moments. "It's feeling like your own brain doesn't belong to you anymore. Like someone rewired everything while you weren't paying attention." Marcus's treatment at Landstuhl included a battery of neurological tests designed to map the extent of his brain injury. MRI scans revealed areas of damage that explained his symptoms, while neuropsychological evaluations tested his cognitive functions. The results painted a picture of significant but potentially recoverable trauma to areas of his brain responsible for balance, short-term memory, and emotional regulation. "The good news is that your brain is young and resilient," explained Dr. Peterson, the neurologist overseeing Marcus's care. "The bad news is that recovery from this type of injury is measured in months and years, not days and weeks. You're going to have good days and bad days, and some symptoms may never completely disappear." During his 2 weeks at Landstuhl, Marcus began to understand the full scope of how the explosion had changed him. Simple tasks like reading a book or following a conversation became exhausting mental exercises. His short-term memory had gaps that left him confused and frustrated. Bright lights triggered severe headaches, and sudden noises made him jump with an intensity that embarrassed him. The medical staff at Landstuhl prepared Marcus for his transfer to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., where he would begin the long process of rehabilitation and recovery. The flight to the United States felt like traveling backward through time, leaving behind the harsh reality of Afghanistan for the alien landscape of his own country. Walter Reed Medical Center was a world unto itself, populated by wounded warriors from every branch of the military and every type of combat injury imaginable. Marcus was assigned to a room in the traumatic brain injury unit, where he would spend the next 4 months learning to live with his invisible wounds. His first weeks at Walter Reed were marked by a depression that seemed to settle over him like a heavy blanket. The young man who had left for Afghanistan with confidence and purpose felt lost in a body and mind that no longer responded predictably to his commands. Simple conversations exhausted him, and the constant headaches made it difficult to focus on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. The rehabilitation program at Walter Reed was comprehensive, involving physical therapists, occupational therapists, neuropsychologists, and social workers. Marcus attended speech therapy sessions to work on word retrieval problems that made him forget common vocabulary in the middle of sentences. He worked with occupational therapists to relearn basic skills like balancing a checkbook and following written instructions. Physical therapy was particularly frustrating because the explosion had damaged his brain's ability to coordinate movement and maintain balance. Exercises that should have been simple, like walking in a straight line or standing on one foot, became major challenges that left him sweating and exhausted. "Brain injury recovery isn't linear," explained Sarah Chun, his occupational therapist. "You'll have days when everything feels normal and days when the simplest tasks seem impossible. The key is not to judge your progress by any single day, but to look at trends over weeks and months." During his 3rd month at Walter Reed, Marcus met Captain Jennifer Morrison, a social worker who specialized in helping brain-injured soldiers transition back to civilian life. Morrison was direct and practical in her approach, focusing on concrete skills and realistic goal setting rather than empty reassurances. "The Army is going to medically retire you," she told Marcus during one of their sessions. Your injury is severe enough that you'll never return to combat duty and probably never return to any military duty. We need to start planning for what comes next. The concept of medical retirement terrified Marcus more than any enemy fire had in Afghanistan. The army had been his escape from poverty, his path to a better life, his source of identity and purpose. Without it, he felt like he was falling backward into the same hopeless situation he had enlisted to escape. I don't know how to be anything except a soldier, he told Morrison, his voice thick with emotion. This was supposed to be my career. This was supposed to save my family. You're still the same person who saved your family by enlisting, Morrison replied. The fact that your service was cut short by an enemy action doesn't diminish what you accomplished. Now we need to figure out how to build on that foundation. As part of his transition planning, Marcus began working with vocational. 6 months after returning home from Walter Reed Medical Center, Marcus Rodriguez had settled into a routine that revolved around managing his invisible wounds while trying to build some semblance of a normal life. His days began at sunrise, not because he was particularly motivated to start them, but because the traumatic brain injury had disrupted his sleep patterns so severely that staying in bed past dawn became physically uncomfortable. The small apartment he shared with his mother felt simultaneously too large and too small for his changed needs. Too large because the empty spaces seemed to echo with reminders of the life he had planned but would never live. Too small because his injury-related mood swings and need for quiet made sharing living space increasingly difficult for both of them. Marcus had enrolled in a community college program for veterans, using his GI Bill benefits to pursue a degree in computer programming. The choice was practical rather than passionate. His rehabilitation counselors had identified technology as a field that could accommodate his cognitive limitations while providing stable employment. The work was solitary, which suited his increased sensitivity to noise and social interaction, and it allowed him to work at his own pace when his brain fog made complex thinking difficult. His first semester was a series of small victories and major setbacks. Simple programming concepts that should have taken days to master required weeks of repetition and practice. His short-term memory problems meant that he had to develop elaborate note-taking systems to track information from one class session to the next. The cognitive load of learning new material left him exhausted in ways that sleep couldn't cure. It's like trying to run a marathon with a broken leg, he explained to Dr. Martinez, the neuropsychologist who continued to monitor his recovery through monthly appointments at the local Veterans Medical Center. I can finish, but it takes everything I have, and I'm never sure if I'm going to make it to the end. The other students in his classes were mostly traditional, college-age kids who treated school as a social experience punctuated by occasional academic requirements. Marcus, at 21, felt decades older than his classmates, separated from them by experiences they couldn't imagine and limitations they couldn't see. He ate lunch alone, studied alone, and avoided the social gatherings that seemed central to everyone else's college experience. It was during his second semester that Marcus first noticed the girl who would change his life in ways he couldn't have predicted. Her name was Isabella Santos, though it would take him weeks to work up the courage to learn that basic fact. She sat 2 rows ahead of him in their shared statistics class, always arriving exactly 5 minutes before the professor, and always leaving immediately when class ended. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't Isabella's obvious beauty, though she was undeniably attractive with her dark hair and quick smile. What drew him to her was the way she seemed to exist in her own space, neither seeking attention from other students nor avoiding it, simply focused on her own goals in a way that reminded Marcus of how he had once approached his military training. Isabella was 23 years old, a single mother working toward a nursing degree while raising her 4-year-old daughter, Sophia. She worked part-time as a certified nursing assistant at the local hospital, attended classes during the day, and spent her evenings helping her daughter with homework and preparing for her own exams. Her life was a carefully orchestrated balance of responsibilities that left little time for social interaction or personal relationships. Marcus, watched Isabella for weeks before finding an excuse to speak with her. His opportunity came when she dropped her statistics textbook outside the classroom building, and Marcus happened to be close enough to retrieve it before the spring wind could scatter the loose papers tucked between its pages. "Thank you," she said, accepting the book and papers with a smile that was polite but not particularly warm. "I can't afford to lose any of my notes this close to the exam." "No problem," Marcus replied, suddenly aware that his voice sounded strange to his own ears. The brain injury had affected his speech patterns in subtle ways that became more noticeable when he was nervous. "Statistics is tough enough without missing notes. You're in Professor Williams' class, right? I've seen you there." Isabella shifted her backpack to her other shoulder, a gesture that Marcus would later learn was her way of signaling that a conversation was approaching its natural end. "Yeah, I sit in the back." "Marcus Rodriguez?" He extended his hand, a formal gesture that felt oddly military in the college setting. "Isabella Santos? Nice to meet you." Her handshake was firm and brief, suggesting someone accustomed to professional interactions. "I should get going. I have to pick up my daughter from daycare." The mention of a daughter surprised Marcus, though he tried not to let it show on his face. Isabella looked young to be a mother, but then again, Marcus had learned that appearances often concealed complex realities that defied simple assumptions. "Maybe I'll see you in class," he said, immediately regretting how awkward the words sounded. "Probably so. Thanks again for the book." Marcus watched Isabella walk toward the parking lot, noting the purposeful stride of someone who had places to be and people depending on her. He felt a flutter of interest that surprised him with its intensity. Since his injury, he had assumed that romantic relationships were beyond his capabilities, too complex and demanding for his damaged brain to navigate successfully over the following weeks. Marcus began timing his arrivals and departures to coincide with Isabella's schedule, creating opportunities for brief conversations that gradually grew more comfortable and natural. He learned that she was originally from El Paso, had moved to their small college town for school, and was determined to finish her nursing degree despite the challenges of being a single parent with limited financial resources. "My daughter is my motivation," Isabella explained during one of their longer conversations after class. "I want to show her that education matters, that you can change your life if you're willing to work hard enough." Marcus found himself inspired by Isabella's determination and practical approach to life's challenges. She reminded him of his mother in some ways, with the same focus on family and willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for larger goals. But Isabella was different too, more assertive and confident in ways that suggested she had learned to rely primarily on herself. Their friendship developed slowly, built around shared study sessions and occasional conversations about their classes. Marcus was careful not to push for more than Isabella seemed willing to offer, partly out of respect for her obvious time constraints and partly because he wasn't sure his injured brain could handle the emotional complexity of a romantic relationship. Isabella, for her part, noticed Marcus's careful distance and attributed it to either disinterest or perhaps discomfort with her status as a single mother. She had experienced both reactions from men before and had to take them personally. Marcus seemed kind and intelligent, but she had no time or energy for decoding mixed signals from men who weren't sure what they wanted. The turning point in their relationship came during finals week of their second semester together. Marcus had been struggling with a particularly difficult programming assignment that required the kind of sustained concentration that his brain injury made nearly impossible. After 3 days of failed attempts, he was on the verge of withdrawing from the class when Isabella found him in the computer lab, staring at a screen full of error messages. "You look like you're about to throw that computer through the window," she observed, settling into the chair beside him. "I might," Marcus admitted, surprised by the relief he felt at having someone to share his frustration with. "I've been working on this program for 3 days, and I can't get it to work right." Isabella studied the code on his screen, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know much about programming, but this looks like the kind of problem that gets worse the more tired you are. When's the last time you took a real break?" I can't afford to take breaks. If I don't turn this in tomorrow, I'll fail the class. And if you collapse from exhaustion, you'll definitely fail the class. Isabella's voice carried the tone of someone accustomed to making practical decisions under pressure. Come on, I'll buy you dinner, and we can look at this with fresh eyes afterward. The dinner invitation was purely practical in Isabella's mind. The kind of problem-solving approach she would take with any friend who was obviously struggling. But for Marcus, it represented the first time since his injury that someone had offered help without treating him like a patient or a charity case. They went to a small Mexican restaurant near campus, where Isabella ordered for both of them in rapid Spanish that impressed Marcus with its fluency. Over plates of enchiladas and rice, Marcus found himself talking more openly than he had with anyone since returning from Afghanistan. I used to be good at everything, he said, pushing food around his plate with his fork. School, sports, military training, everything just made sense, you know? Now I feel like I'm trying to solve puzzles with half the pieces missing. Isabella studied his face across the small table, noting the tension around his eyes and the way he seemed to choose his words carefully, as if language required more effort than it once had.